Thank you very much. I'm a retired GP, so I can't give you any clinical advice, and anything I say which is clinical needs to be challenged or put in a pot and take a pinch and throw it away. But we will be doing some clinical stuff today because that's more fun than starting with anything else. Just to help me to start, can you put your hands up like that if you know lots about planetary health, and down there if you think you don't, or anywhere in between? So just give me a bit of a clue where we are. Got some lots of averages, some average to low. Great, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Just sort of make sure that everyone's still alive at the beginning of the meeting, which is good to start with. So, I hope you read the jump. I just think it's important to share what I am and where I am and where I'm from. Yeah, I don't need to read it. I'm sure all the GPs here know about the Montgomery verdict because it governs everyday clinical practice. And basically, the Supreme Court said that patients must be advised about their treatment options, the risks associated with each option, so that they can make an informed decision when giving or withholding consent to treatment. It's the legal basis on which we believe that shared decision making is what's required. So there's a legal foundation. I would suggest if you don't know the epidemiology of a disease, or if you don't know what's causing a disease, and you can't explain that, you're probably not helping patients to make informed decisions because they don't understand enough about the context. So some of what we're going to do today is just looking at the information around climate connections, about how that all works, to make that as interesting as possible. There are only about 4 slides of theory, then we get into real life, just in case anyone's already bored and about to walk out. Sustainable healthcare, I would suggest, has 4 principles. The best thing to do is to prevent an illness. The next bit is what is called patient self-care. I think in other circles than doctors, we talk about agency, enabling people to be in control of what they want. Then we get to lean service delivery, and then we get to low carbon alternatives. And that's the core principles. The switching a drug is the last option. The preventing it is what we're going to have to do more of if we're going to reduce the carbon footprint of the NHS. Last theory slide. I would suggest there are 2 things that we're looking at tonight. One is, how does planetary health impact on this patient or population's health? So how does climate change, air pollution, ozone layer, how do all of those make a difference to this patient? And then the second one, I'll just go to the other side because it is the other side of the coin, and that is, how does what we do contribute to planetary health and make it? So, anybody give me an idea of what size the total healthcare sector in the UK is in proportion to the UK's carbon footprint? What part of the big pie chart would healthcare be on that pie chart? Someone give me a number. We'll go up and down from there. 50%. It's a bit further down. 5%. 5%? 10%
not including patient and staff travel.
5% is a figure that's normally given. What's the equivalent number for the aviation industry, as the aviation industry calculates it? Sorry, just to put that slight caveat in. It doesn't include a lot of the things.
4. A bit less. 5.
Just a fraction less than us, probably. So yeah, we are as big a carbon contributor as a system as aviation.
What's included in that transportation of material as well, or?
Well, we can come to that later, but we can come to it now because you've asked the question. So, what's the biggest proportion of that within our practice? What causes most of it? You can have electricity and gas. You can have services and organisations. We've got some practice managing people here. you can have travel for patients, travel for doctors, you can have pharmaceuticals, and you can have everything else. Which of those is the biggest? Travel is the second biggest.
Pharmaceuticals?
Pharmaceuticals is 60 to 70% of our carbon footprint in primary care. That's partly because hospitals have forgotten how to prescribe pharmaceuticals, and they always sort of, well, go get it from your GP, and they don't do repeat prescriptions unless it's really weird. So generally, we do almost all prescribing except for things which are consumed inside the hospital. So yeah, it's not surprising we do the majority of it. But yes, 70%, and of that, 80% of the carbon footprint of pharmaceuticals come from manufacture, the creation of the molecule, and the manufacture of it. So the little bits that are on the edges, transport, packaging, are little bits on the edges. They're 5% each for those sorts of add-ons that we'll come to. Okay, so pharmaceuticals is really big. That may be where we're coming to with one side of this. So, for the purposes of keeping me happy, which I hope you can do for the next hour, you're consulting in the UK in a moderately deprived primary care centre. I know there are none like that in Leeds at all. They're all in wonderful leafy suburbs. It's midsummer and there's a heat wave. The following are all patients that you have contact with this morning or afternoon or evening. And for each of the patients, we're going to think about links to planetary health. Okay? Heat wave is 20 degrees or more for 3 days. What happens to mortality in heat waves? It goes up. Okay? And what happens to mortality when we have cold spells? It goes up. And which one is bigger? That's a lovely answer, but unfortunately not true. So we're getting new mortality in the UK from heat waves, because we didn't used to have as many people dying from heat waves. So that's new to us, so it's additional to what we've always had. We've always done a spring clean of the elderly. Sorry, it's a little bit cynical. There's always been lots of people killed and dying early because of cold spells. And that excess death, they wouldn't necessarily have died for several years, and that is much bigger as an effect than the heating impact. But we're more close to the summer than we are to the forthcoming winter, so I thought I'd do a hot day in summer than going backwards. So, for this 14-year-old girl comes to see you with poorly controlled asthma, presents with her asking what they can do to stop her coughing all the time. They live close to the main road in town. You notice on her medication history that she's had 8 Ventolin PDMDI inhalers, 2 Clanil PDMDI in the last 6 months. They're asking for some more cough syrup. So what's the planetary health connection with that? Or should people with asthma cough all the time, first of all? Okay, agree? They shouldn't. What's the relevance of living near the main road? I'm deaf, I'm old. Air pollution? Okay, so air pollution, really big factor, really relevant. The closer you live to the road, it is an exponential, it's not a linear one, so actually just walking the other side of the pavement makes a difference to your risks. Which, just while we're on air pollution, because I'll probably cover it later, we won't get there. You're travelling to do your school run. You're either walking, cycling, or going by car to do the school run. Which one's going to give you the biggest air pollution? So can I have hands up for the least air pollution if you're in your car? Come on, let's have own your thoughts if that's the case. Least if you're cycling, and least if you're walking. I think the walkers and cyclists are pretty similar. The car drivers have a higher air pollution exposure. And that's because you have only 2 meters from you, or less than 2 meters from you, or underneath you, depending on the design of your car, and a big engine. And if you don't have an engine, you have other people's exhaust coming in, and you have your brakes and tyres. So you are very close to a lot of things causing pollution. And those that will gradually build up in your vehicle, inside the cabin, and isn't removed by most ventilation systems. So you get more air pollution driving than you do walking. And you actually get least cycling because cyclists are extremely good. I've never noticed a cyclist weaving across the road to make sure they're not standing behind the bus, but I believe, Tash, you cycle. Have you ever seen somebody do something like that? It's been known, hasn't it? So cyclists tend never to be in the very heavy pockets because they always move to avoid. So, what do you think about the ratio of cleanliness or salbutamol? Bad. So are we planetary health here, or are we just being good doctors?
Planetary health is both.
Both.
So your
Both.
Ventolin MDI is the worst for propellants.
Ventolin MDI is worse. Why is Ventolin MDI worse?
It's the type of propellant, I can't remember the details.
It's the propellant. How powerful is the propellant compared to carbon dioxide? Anyone give me a number? We can go up and down. 10. You need to go up quite a lot. You need to go up more than that. You need 1,000. You need to go up from that. 1,500. 1,500 times as powerful. So methane, which we talk about releasing from permafrost, 30 times as powerful. SF6, which they use in when they do retinal surgery, is 27,000 times. That's the most powerful one that man's invented. Anything with fluorine is particularly bad for that. I think that's getting off point, although it's always interesting to do bizarre things. So ratio of cleanliness of salbutamol is bad from a clinical perspective because so how many people think that the right way to treat rheumatoid arthritis is to give people non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and say, this is your reliever treatment? Is that good practice? What do we do with rheumatoid nowadays? Do we have an early access rheumatoid clinic in Leeds?
Well, allegedly.
Sorry, do we have a clinic which calls itself the Leeds early access? Because the sooner you get there, the less damage you get. Because it's an inflammatory condition. Is that right? Yeah. And I'm not a doctor anymore, I've forgotten everything, but anyone tell me what the underlying pathology is with asthma? It's an inflammatory condition. I can hear people muttering under their breath. So why aren't we only talking about your treatment, and this is for relief? Why do you talk about preventers as if it was an option? We don't talk about it as an option in any other treatment. And is that why we have double the death rate from asthma in UK compared to most European countries? National Asthma Death Review. It is 13 years old, that statistic, but it is quite stunning, and our death rate hasn't changed since then. So good medicine and good planetary health would be to prevent asthma rather than to be behind the game all the time and trying to relieve it with the Ventolin and PDMDIs. Ventolin is particularly bad. The other reason Ventolin is bad is you have double the volume in a Ventolin because the actual size is bigger. So that's why Ventolin is worse than Salomon, is because you have more of the propellant. It's the propellant that's the problem, and you have a bigger volume in that old-fashioned Ventolin inhaler than you do in a Salomon. That's why the switches were made, and that's the scientific logic behind it, just in case anyone was behind on that. So I think I've just answered drug delivery system or the drug issue. It's a propellant, isn't it? It's a propellant which is 1,500 times as powerful as carbon dioxide. The drugs are the same. When we talk about asthma care in the UK compared to comparable countries, cough syrup effective? I would argue with that. It's very effective. You can make loads of money by selling it, otherwise Benelli wouldn't do it. So for some purposes, it's very effective. If you want to earn money as a drug company, you sell cough syrups. If you want effective treatment on an evidence base, then you don't prescribe it. So for me, there's a planetary health there. Any prescription for cough medicine would be unnecessary and therefore actually is excessive and causing problems. So we need to think about that as part of planetary health. They're causing problems. So what should we be doing? What should the treatment be here? breath activated, steroid led, or if we're not going for just steroids, what are the other options which Leeds probably now has on their formulary? I think I was trying to go for Mars, where you get both together all the time. That might be easier to sell. That might be easier to persuade patients that they're still getting the benefit of the drug they used to get every time they use it, so they're still getting something to open up their airways immediately. And if that's something they're worried about, that would be relevant. Okay, so relevant because it's a cause. We're causing planetary health. Just a few slides to go with that. There you are. PMDIs to DPI, 175 miles London to Sheffield, 4 miles around London or around Sheffield or even around Leeds. And PMDIs are safer because they have safer for disposal. Do pharmacists have a responsibility to take old Ventolin inhalers or old inhalers of any sort?
I think they can sign up for it.
That's a US contract, right?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Depends which local pharmaceutical company.
It doesn't. It is a legal requirement of their NHS contract that they collect them. It is a legal obligation for them to do that. Not an option. Those who don't have much space will have to be better at using their space. Sometimes think that most pharmacies sell things in some of the space that they could be storing the Ventolin or the other inhalers that they have a legal obligation to collect. So I'm not sure I completely buy they can't afford to do it, but they do have a legal obligation. And why is it important to dispose of inhalers via a pharmacy? What happens if you don't dispose of them via a pharmacy? Well, they go to
landfill. And
They go to landfill?
They release more. It's one thing that you should incinerate. Well, in Leeds, they'd be incinerated because we've got a big incinerator, but that doesn't really.
But it's at a lower temperature, so you get more of the original unbroken down because the temperatures aren't as high and consistent. So Sheffield the same issue. So temperature does make a difference. And DPIs have a dose counter as well, which as someone who is asthmatic is very useful to have a dose counter, because I then do know when I'm running low or can actually order something myself. It's quite useful. Can I just have, I'm really confident about teaching it to I'm really not good at teaching it, on how good we are at teaching inhaler technique?
My nurses are really good.
Your nurses are really good. Well, your nurses are unusual if they're really good, actually, because only 60% of nurses are good at it, and it's about 30% of GPs are good at doing it. What technique do most people tend to use when they are using an inhaler?
What inhaler are you talking about?
If you give them an inhaler, what technique will they tend to use? So they use the right technique for a dry powder. They use massive right at the beginning, which is not the technique for the 70-80% of people in the UK who are given metered dose inhalers. In fact, it means we've got the right technique for the thing that we're not giving them enough of. And just before we cover the last bit here, if you go to Norway, oh, well, of course it's there, and it says the answer's there. 80% of all inhalers in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Austria, Finland are dry powder inhalers. Okay, so there are some people who are very, very young, 5, 6, who certainly can't use dry powder inhalers. But 8-year-olds in Finland quite commonly do it, and actually their licensing allows them in some of those countries to do it under 10. Now, our licensing doesn't here, so you'd have to do it off license. But then every time you do a nomad, everything you put in the nomad is off license because you've removed the license by putting it into a dosette box. So we do off license rather more than we think we do all the time. So really easy to make the change. Most people can make the change. Most people will want to make the change. Most people actually, the people who struggle most are those who are used to getting that hit at the back of the throat and are used to feeling it and knowing it, which you don't know as clearly with a dry powder inhaler. So that's the biggest challenge. This is just me providing some evidence so that actually you can see a proper graph rather than just me spouting on. So you've got the 20% of chemicals, of medicines, and 5% of metered dose in anaesthetics. That's part of your total NHS. That's how much it is. Or if we look at it in primary care, we're looking at that little bar there. The biggest bar in the whole of the NHS is our prescribing. Way, way bigger than anything else. So, and how much do we think it's the practice manager's job to change what people are prescribed? Do you think that's a good idea? I think there's probably, I don't need to ask in an LMC circle, but nowhere should we be asking managers to make changes to people's medications. That needs to be done with the patients. It needs to be shared decision making. It needs to involve patients if it's a change of technique, of system. So we need to involve people to make this work. If we're going to do that, that's up to us or clinicians working with us to make those changes rather than anybody else. Any questions about any of the asthma related or how we're causing? Yes, please.
Could you just tell me the multiplier for ventral propellant CO2 again?
It's at 1,500.
1,500.
If you go to, I think it's Flutiform, and I've got two experts in the room who probably will remember better than me, that's 3,000. There are new, there's, how do I put this politely? I'll go bother. Drug companies lie. So drug companies lie, and they will tell you that there is a new MDI that they're producing which is going to be low carbon, which is net zero. And they bought carbon offsets. So what they're producing is causing just as much damage. The damage is absolutely consistent there. There is no improvement, and they have bought offsets. If you look at various newspapers, you will find that the offsets are said to be of probably negative value.
What was the benefit of the CFC free inhalers? Because they pedalled that for a long time as being the best
So
way forward.
we used to have inhalers which burnt the ozone zone. So we went from those to the CFC ones, and that was why CFC were really good. We then, and there's one person, NHS managers are driven by marginal costs and apparent marginal costs. And because the cost of a metered dose inhaler is slightly cheaper than a dry powder inhaler in the UK, we've been pushed down that because it's cheaper. Now, cheapness is an interesting concept, because if you're, and we know that 30% of inhalers are disposed of either with a large amount in or nothing in at all, so they've been completely useless for quite a while. So we have lots of people we're causing illness to, or that they're causing enormous harm. So the lack of a dose counter makes metered dose, I think, makes them much less effective. We don't use the right technique. So actually, controlling people better with a technique, with an inhaler which they can use, which they have more control over, knowing how full it is actually going to reduce our costs long term. But we were driven, the reason we went down, because when nobody else is as old as me, I'm glad to say, we used to have rotor caps. Can anybody else here remember rotor caps, Ventolin rotor caps? Yeah. Which was the go-to for all kids. Sorry, kids. Oh yeah, kids using dry powder. We can't do that now, can we? Because they're kids and they don't have the inhalation power. Kids were all prescribed Ventolin rotor caps. Just click it and in it went. And that was what everybody used. But it was cheaper for the NHS for us to go down the metered dose CFC free, which is why we went down that route. And it was a small change, but those few pence were enough for the NHS to think it was better. Please.
Oh, sorry. What's the cost difference between let's say a Ventolin or some useful MDI and an easy inhaler?
I can't give you the absolute, but the difference is not big.
think about, if you add to a couple of spaces a year, so it goes up a little bit, because you have to, obviously that. So, overall, is it?
For me, the core bit would be, so although I'm a planetary health geek, I'm also fascinated by how we can improve healthcare. And actually, if we can make more people healthier and go away from habits which have led us to have the worst asthma outcomes in Europe, I think that's probably rather good.
Well, we shouldn't need any ventilator inhalers. If you're controlling your asthma properly, you should really never need to use it. So it should cost nothing, really.
So I think there's great options and a great future, but I'm going to try and move on, otherwise we'll only look at asthma today. That's quite boring. 36-year-old man comes to your surgery, recently returned from southern France, flu-like illness, exhausted, fever, rash, vomiting, got bitten by lots of mosquitoes when in southern France, a bit like lots of his friends did in the gap year when he was in Southeast Asia. What's the most likely diagnosis? You're all up to date and I'm old and past it. What are your possible diagnoses? Do we think the mosquitoes are relevant? Yes. If the mosquitoes are relevant, what are the diseases that mosquitoes cause? Dengue. Malaria. Pregnant women in Brazil, just Zika. Yeah. So we're getting a bit exotic. Well, are we getting exotic? That's an interesting question, given that we had a case of tick-borne encephalitis in north of here, actually, wasn't it? It was in North Yorkshire earlier this summer. I think this fits probably best with dengue. Probably. So that's and bigger nerve questions. Can anybody remember the different types of mosquitoes that are associated with them? Falciparum is actually the Plasmodium falciparum is the type of malaria rather than the Anopheles for your malaria.
Dengue is daytime and malaria is nighttime.
And dengue is Aedes aegypti. Okay? So how close to us do you think we have a resident endemic population of Aedes aegypti? So people shout out a country or an area or part of Scotland that they think that there's a resident part of population of Aedes aegypti, who is there all the time, an endemic population of Aedes aegypti.
Southern Italy?
Further north. Go to northern Italy because that's further north, but it's further north than that as well. Go from France, and yep, this is France, and yes, there's a resident population in France.
Norfolk?
And that's why this is Norfolk, yes. Norfolk and London. We have Aedes aegypti here, and all of you will remember that dengue fever, about a third of the people with dengue fever on average, I seem to remember, I wouldn't have looked it up, are asymptomatic. So if you've got a third of the population who get dengue fever who are asymptomatic, and we have a resident population in southern England of dengue, it is a very short time until, like Lyme's disease, which used to be just the New Forest, nowhere else in the UK, we have dengue resident throughout the UK. Because we didn't have Aedes aegypti as a resident population 10 years ago in the UK. That's new. And where's the closest resident population of malaria mosquitoes of Anopheles? Further north, more common. Where do most patients in Leeds go on holiday? Spain. Spain. Yes, someone's got Bridlington, but not Bridlington, not Bridlington.
Safe to go to Britain.
Yes, safe to go to Bridlington, but there is malaria now endemic. We have endemic malaria in southern Spain. We have endemic dengue throughout the Mediterranean, including in southern France. So, yeah, I guess that's probably a change in differential diagnosis that we ought to be aware of and we ought to be thinking about. So this 80-year-old man presented with sudden onset of one-sided weakness, slurred speech, lives with a similarly aged wife, deprived neighbourhood, been on treatment with thiazide, calcium channel blocker for hypertension, normally fit and well, discharged on Saturday and aspirin by hospital, and remember, it's hot. So what's the connection to planetary health?
Is stroke one of the things that's more common in heat waves? I'm asking myself, I don't know.
Yes! As is heart attack. Why is it? Can anyone do the physiology?
Dehydration, maybe?
Dehydration is one part. What's the other bit of the physiology?
More pressure on the circulatory system. Everything's just
Because
pumping
everything
out.
goes out to your periphery, so the heart's got nothing to pump, so it has to pump harder to get what little it's got going round, so you get greater pressure. In addition to which, you'll notice that he's on a thiazide to make him more dehydrated and a calcium channel blocker to make him maximally peripherally dilated. Great news! One thing for a person of his ethnicity, of course, but not great. So what should we be doing? Should we be talking about people taking a drug holiday? Well, the answer is I can't give you clear advice on that. I am in the process of working with some pharmacists to write a chapter on a book on sustainable primary healthcare, and they said we should be talking about drug holidays in this when it's hot, but they couldn't actually find any references to say exactly what you should do. So my advice, no. I wonder if you have patients who have access to a blood pressure machine, whether it might be good for them to check their blood pressure when it's very hot and make a decision based on that. But of course I wouldn't advise that because I can't advise anything because I try not to give advice nowadays.
A study on that would be really fascinating, but it would be super difficult to do.
Yeah. So he makes him more likely to die, makes him more likely to have heart attacks, makes him more likely to have strokes. What else is going on here? Well, how else am I going to? Because you don't think I'm just going to give you one link to planetary health, do you? On whatever Thursday evening. What else is the connection between having strokes and having heart attacks? Deprivation.
Probably air pollution.
Probably air pollution.
Particulates.
Air pollution is a major factor in causing strokes. So his deprivation not only makes it harder for him to cope, but it also makes him much more likely to have the stroke. And how common is air pollution nowadays? According to the WHO, rather than according to this government, just some. I won't talk about our current local government defined air pollution. WHO says that in cities, what percentage of the time do we have an air pollution problem?
All the time.
I think they say 95% of the time, not all the time. I don't know which city bucked the trend or had a nice bit in at some time, but 95% of the time in Leeds there is an air pollution problem, according to WHO. 95%. So, 40-year-old male fireman comes to see you, asking for more opiate painkillers. Pain relief is recovering from multiple fractures from an incident at work. He was rescuing people from a house locally when it was flooded and then collapsed probably more than 5 months ago. And it's probably more like 9 months ago, and he was probably in West Yorkshire. So what's the planetary health connection, apart from flooding in West Yorkshire? Lack of beavers, I think. They would help, but they're not the solution on their own, although they're really important.
Chronic use of painkillers opiate painkillers isn't evidence-based.
So what should we be doing? What should, ideally, we be aiming to try and help him to do? Rehabilitate, which means what?
Learn how to manages activity and manages pain, reprogramming.
So just all of you will know this, relative reduction in risk. So apart from antibiotics, who can give me a drug that you take consistently, regularly to control a chronic disease, which has a more than 30% efficacy? Can anyone give me any drugs which have that sort of efficacy? So statins for primary prevention, we're on what? Nothing. Minimal. Statins for secondary prevention, 10, 15%, I think, is rough off the top. Can anyone give me any drugs? You prescribe drugs all the day.
Allopurinol, maybe? I don't know, but it seems to work.
Seems to work, yeah. Aspirin? Probably gives you about 20%, doesn't it? Yeah. So can anyone give me a non-drug which can give you 30, 40, 60% relative reduction in illness?
Exercise.
And yet, we're all embarrassed to prescribe it. And we don't have any drug companies to help us to prescribe it. We don't have lovely charts and giveaways to help us prescribe it. But we have got 40% reduction in improvement in cognitive decline, 35% diabetes, etc., 48% in depression, 66% bone fractures. Apart from antibiotics, it's the wonder drug. I mean, all of those benefits. And yet we find it difficult to persuade people to do it. So we don't think it's worth us spending our time doing that, and we find it easier to prescribe medication than exercise. And there is another reason for that, of course. And you're all sorry, I won't look at anybody in particular, but we are being watched all the time. So what your scores are on how good you are at primary prevention, secondary prevention. The CCG, the ICB know these scores, they know how well you're doing, and you're scored on them, which is an encouragement to prescribe stuff which doesn't have nearly this effectiveness. But we don't have any way to put in, we don't have a read code or a SNOMED code, if I'm trying to be modern and up to date, which will allow me to say, I persuaded the patient to walk to 2 bus stops down the road rather than the one that's immediately outside their house. That would make a difference, because if you started judging people on how often they'd done a real exercise intervention and really looked with somebody about how they exercise, what they do, it might make it would reduce their prescribing burden. It would also improve their health. So I think it's a real challenge. I don't do the job anymore, so I'm not going to pretend it's easy. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just saying, but we often forget to do it, or we often find it too difficult to do, or there isn't a way to record it, so we don't do it as often as we could. 32-year-old pregnant woman wanting to understand why her baby has growth restriction. We're told by the midwife that her smoking reading, carbon monoxide, is high despite never having smoked. She's wondering whether it could be related to living near one of the busiest roads in town. I'm getting some nods. This is because it's so air pollution, enormous and really important. What are practical steps that people can do to reduce the air pollution if they live in a ground floor, first floor flat, close to a road? What can they do to reduce?
Keep them closed certain times of the day. Keep the windows closed certain times of the day.
Anything else?
Plants.
Plants, thank you. If you grow plants, ideally outside the house, but even on the windowsill, that will reduce the air pollution inside the house. And it will also make you happier, because actually contact with green things makes you happier. So not only will it reduce your depression on average, non-statistical, not going to claim I've got a study to justify that comment, but we probably can extrapolate, and I think I probably nailed it. But yeah, growing plants, significant reduction. Not very nice for the plant, but I think on average, plants living is better than plants not being there at all. So growing the plant is probably a good thing to be doing. I think I've got some other bits I was going to try and say here. So can anyone just break air pollution down for me into different sorts? What is air pollution? We had somebody saying particles. Anything else that's... What else is in air pollution? Think about your old... What was the smell you got from coal fires or from the coal power station in Leeds when you were younger? What did that smell of? Slightly acidic, slightly sulfuric, sulfur dioxide. What are the other really big ones that we get, especially from diesel? In fact, you get whenever there is a flame. So you'll get it inside houses if you have any heating which is based on a flame, whether that's a gas boiler or a coal fire or a wood fire. You'll still get it. So nitrous oxides, a mixture of nitrous oxides, big part. Then you've got methane and you've got your NVOX, non-volatile organic compounds.
What's the pollution you get with fireworks? Because the whole city stinks out of fireworks.
I think a lot of that is sulfur related, but you've also got all the other funny chemicals to make all those beautiful colours. And you get some phosphorus stuff as well, which has got a very distinctive smell, because that's used for some of the colours, although they don't use pure phosphorus here. I think it's common use quite a long way south here at the moment. We won't get into that difficulty at the moment. Big use of phosphorus, but phosphorus is another big one, which would be the sun smell. So those are the big causes. Different things will cause different amounts. And then you've got different amounts from different sources over time. And this is me trying not to be as depressing as I normally am. So I've managed to be, well, I haven't been depressing because you're all changing your inhalers. You're all trying to go for prevention. You're all doing the right things about diagnosis. You're all wanting to change people from their opiates. So actually, this isn't depressing. This is actually all of you doing good medicine. And the more you do good medicine and think about it, the more likely you can link that with doing good planetary health care as well as good classical medicine. So the two go together almost all the time. We have made progress. I'm afraid that the progress we've made on air pollution is almost all related to technical changes in our cars rather than anybody trying to do it. So yes, we did start from making great progress on it. Yes, Rishi Sunak is telling the truth when he says that. No, we're not going to make much progress if we don't actually make big changes now, because we've got to make the changes we've got to invest to make changes now, and that means making different ways of doing installation, approaching how much we're overheating our homes, and then leaking it straight through the leakiest housing structures that we've got. So just quickly, indoor air pollution, is indoor air pollution an issue? Yes. Yeah. And what's worst? Indoor air pollution? Anybody here got a wood burning stove? They're rubbish, I'm afraid. They're absolutely rubbish for air pollution. Every time you open them. So if you do have one, the safest technique is to burn them very hot, get the heat, let them get cold, and then start again, rather than trying to just keep them going all the time. If you try to keep them at a low heat all the time, we're back to what happens with our incinerators. You'll get much less effective burning off of the organic compounds, and you get much more carcinogens and small particle debris coming out of them. So generally much worse for that reason. So what conditions can people name that are caused by or massively increased by or significantly increased by air pollution? And because I'm a simple guy, just give me one beginning with D. Dementia, yes. Diabetes, yes. Asthma, certainly all the respiratory illnesses, including cancer. Some non-squamous cancers are almost exclusively caused by particular types of particulates. latest research. So diabetes, dementia, depression. This one's cheating slightly because the D is the second letter of the four-letter acronym. ADHD, developmental delay. So if you want to go through age, low birth weight, prem labour, pretty much anything obstetric, increased asthma, lung development problems, wheezing cough, start of atherosclerosis in children related to air pollution, asthma, coronary heart disease, stroke, lung cancer, COPD, diabetes, dementia. I think we've covered most of those. But as you can see, there's actually not very many illnesses that are. There's evidence of connection with cataract. There's evidence of connection with skin problems. Where you look for it, you'll find evidence of connection. Air pollution is a major, major challenge for us, which we need to allow patients to know about at the level that they want to engage with us. But we shouldn't be avoiding telling people that it is a risk. And of course, there has been one death. So Rees-Mogg is very keen to point out only one death has ever been linked to it. That's because it's not on the list of the Royal College of Pathology's list of normal causes of death. So at the moment, you can list death is contributed to by inhalation of burnt tobacco, but you can't have people having their death contributed to by burnt petrochemicals, even though we know that it is actually now second to burnt tobacco and higher than alcohol as a cause of death. How many of you record the alcohol intake of your patients? Or think that it's a good thing if you do, or think, well, I need to teach people to do that. How many people record the air pollution levels that people live in their neighbourhood? We don't know how to, we don't know how to ask the questions, we don't know how to record it, we don't have a system for it. It's still beyond where we are, and yet it's a major cause of health issues and cause of death. So, non-memory chronic pain, OA, co-treatable, 8500, some codeine at night, depression, for which is on paroxetine, chronic reflux, which some methadone controls very well, dermatitis, you take some benzoate ID, bilatum and a nightly chlorpheniramine, and he's got diet-controlled diabetes, but it's not controlled anymore, and his friend thinks he should be on metformin, so he's come to see you. What's the planetary health connection? Over-medicalisation. So he's on a whole lot of drugs for individual things. Anything. This is the prize. If I'd remember to bring one from Sheffield for you. Prize question: what's special about the medicines that he's on? This is an ITB sort of person question. Out of date. So he's not on the best. He's not on the best of anything, but he's on these.
What else? Like formulary choice.
Not formulary choice, but he's happy on them. What's the what? What's
There an element of cascade prescribing?
What, each one for a different thing?
Well, as in he's on some metadone, but he's also on paroxetine, which could be contributing to his reflux.
Yep.
So codeine could be contributing to his depression.
Do we notice anything thinking that our pharmacology Viva break? They are all got a significant anticholinergic burden. So this guy's got an anticholinergic burden of 9 going on 10. What's the evidence in terms of anticholinergic burdens and risk of death? Or, and above what number? 3. So above 3, which is paroxetine on its own, by the way. Paroxetine gives you 3 on its own. I think methadone gives you 2. Yeah, codeine 1, paroxetine 3, cimetidine 2, chlorpheniramine 3, metformin 1. So we would be giving him a cocktail of anticholinergics which would make him massively more likely to die, and aren't very good for him, and aren't very well out of his space, and aren't on formulary. So
And he just needs to exercise.
and exercising or something else might make a difference. And because we talked about exercise already, I just went down the other angle on this one and just thought I should at least advertise the planetary health diet. BJGP a couple of years ago, 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, reducing premature mortality by 20% by going to a flexitarian diet with only one portion of red meat a week. We didn't have red meat until very recently. We're not built to have red meat. We're not built to have much meat at all if you look at health outcomes. And if you look at the carbon footprint, going vegetarian from going standard meat eating halves your carbon footprint. If you go vegan, you do get a further reduction. If you go vegan for a day, you'll get a further reduction for that day. So don't try and follow a label, would be my advice. If you follow a label and you don't do it perfectly, you're then failing. And that then makes you think, well, why am I doing this if I fail? So it's much better, as my vegan friend says, I'm delighted if you're vegan for a day. He actually said, yeah, I'm delighted if you're vegan for 2 hours to me, but that's, so yeah, the better we can do, the better we can move. Changing diet is got lots of cultural connections, lots of other challenges as well, but it is really important to do or to think about. And there's your carbon footprint by type of diet. So even the no beef that we had here, or you had here tonight, is better than the meat lover or the average. It makes a big difference. And also, what's the evidence about high vegetable, high fruit intake and health? Are people who have high fruit and vegetable intakes on average healthier than people who eat a standard traditional Western diet? I think I'm getting some nods. So if we're looking at how we can improve our patients' health and how we can make them, we can support a reduction in carbon damage, there's so many different ways in which it's an advantage to go down these routes. 25-year-old man comes to see you with very severe anaphylactic reactions to penicillin. He's just moved and he's getting low-grade symptoms coming on and off, not all the time, just episodes of low-grade symptoms. He wonders if it could be linked to the fact that the water is different in Leeds from the water in Sheffield, and could there be penicillin in his tap water? Hands up those who think he's crazy. Hands up who think that, sorry, crazy, totally sane.
Not sure.
I'm probably there on this one. So if we look at that, water from our rivers are full of medications, particularly, I think it's, we get contraceptive pills there, you get lots of epileptic medication and lots of NSAIDs in there as well. Penicillin, you do get some, so it's quite significant. If we look at where we found pharmaceuticals detected at active levels, you will notice we either are better testing for it, which is part of the problem, or we have much higher levels. So, and just to do the immunology bit again, because I'm not very clever anymore on that sort of thing, it's an IgE reaction that you get if you're having a penicillin, and that you only need a minute amount. So this slide started off suggesting it was NSAID, and it doesn't work it might work with penicillin. So he might be telling the truth, but we don't know. But he should be taken seriously because there is I was about to say a shitload, but that's probably the wrong expression. Normally there isn't that much pure shit in the water we drink. There's quite a lot in the sea that isn't processed, but shed load was the word that I probably, being polite, should have said. So when they did a world survey, they found no water in a river in Iceland and none in a Venezuelan village. And the commonest are carbamazepine, caffeine, metformin, NSAIDs, and we are getting change in fish behaviour, and they've had vultures almost wiped out in India from NSAID poisoning. Now that actually wasn't water, to make sure I'm not accused of mixing my stories. That was because they look after their cows so well that they gave the cows lots of Voltarol. Cows that eventually died, and the Voltarol was then eaten by the vultures, and that killed the vultures. But that's the level that we're getting to with these issues. So yeah. I think that's all stuff that we've 25% at least one active pharmaceutical ingredient at levels considered unsafe for aquatic wildlife. We could go on all night, but I think I've got, if we're going into my question time, I've got another couple of minutes. 20-year-old psychology student, not coping, worries about the climate, her family's future, she's thinking of stopping university, no point getting a degree if the world continues to get harder. She got very involved in eco-activism, she's now thinking no point this big business and capitalism is so powerful. She's eating okay, sleep is 6 to 7 hours a night, it's not only waking. What's the problem? Reactive depression we have as a bit.
The system.
The system. We have a divergence of opinion here.
Well, reactive depression due to the system.
Or I would actually say she's probably got eco-distress. So I think she hasn't got depression. I'm reluctant to use either the word depression or anxiety to describe how she is without further exploration. She could have either of those, and certainly further exploration would be completely appropriate to do that. But it may well be that this is eco-distress. This is a normal reaction to the current world that we are in. Like he says, trying to pretend that he's respectable and not make too many swearing words at the wrong point. So it's really common. About 60% of young people have episodes of eco-distress at the moment. It's very only a fifth of the adult population said they were neither worried nor unworried by the current situation. Treatment for or management for eco-distress would be
Stress management stuff.
possibly, yeah, certainly part of it.
Green and blue therapy.
Green and blue therapy,
Mindfulness.
get back outside, get back with people, and rejoin her groups. And maybe a different group if the group that she was in is no longer the right one for her, but actually being with other people who share your understanding of the world can be very much more supportive than being being isolated and not having an awareness, being surrounded by people who aren't worried about this and aren't thinking about it. Because it's quite supportive to be with those people. And we might mention some exercise, we might mention some diet as well. And at that I probably should stop because I could go on. There's, being a GP surgery, of course, there's an infinite number of patients. So I was only asked to do one surgery, but the surgery actually had, there were 20 patients in my 1 hour surgery, which is probably quite normal. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mike. So we've got 10 minutes for questions for Mike. shout out any questions.
And when you talk about food, do you talk about ultra processed food? So I was just thinking that ultra processed food is generally bad for health. Presumably the carbon footprint
Is
of ultra
rubbish.
processed, yeah.
Yeah, so ultra processed food I think is, so yeah, I mean, if I'm talking about food, I'd be talking about maximising the numbers of fruit and vegetables that you have in your diet, which is difficult to do if you live in parts of Leeds, where there is one shop and it doesn't sell very much, but it does sell pizza that you can get and not much else. So it is difficult, but the evidence, the more we can help people to have fresh food, fresh vegetables, the more we can avoid ultra-processed food. Of course, for the vegans, that does pose some challenges because a lot of vegan food is ultra-processed. So if you're having cheese or cheese, or if you're having fake chicken or fake whatever else, those are all ultra-processed. So you are back into big business, big organisations, lots of carbon being put into them to make them. So there is a good argument to actually go back to, I could get boring here, we've got beans growing at home still, we're drying them and they're called lazy housewife, and you leave them on until November, which is just fantastic, because we're going to be picking them in November and there'll be beans to cook for quite a while. Lovely name, but yes, that's ideally where we should be going. Ultra-processed food, highly processed food is not where we should be going. When we have the choice and when we can manage to make those changes, and we're back to every time we avoid it, that's better. We can't avoid it all the time. I'm sure there was some ultra-processed mayonnaise in the wraps there, which I've just eaten because I'm hungry, and that was the right decision to make. Other questions?
Any more questions? Most of you will probably be aware of the Surplus to Purpose junk food project in Leeds. Good to point your patients to, reduces food waste, and very cheaply they can get some really good food. Have a look at the website, and then there's lots of community pantries across the city. I'm sure you're all aware of your local ones.
Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure to come. There are more cases. There's lots to learn.
My name's Sally Franks. I'm co-chair of Greener Practice Leeds, along with my friend and colleague Natasha Gordon, who's over there. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes telling you about the Leeds branch of Greener Practice, who we are, what we've been up to, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rosie Taylor, who's very, very kindly agreed to come along tonight and give a non-clinical perspective on making sustainable changes in practice. And Rosie's only been at our practice since the summer, so it's brilliant to have you here, thank you. We're also going to be doing a bit of a live demo, fingers crossed, of the Green Impact for Health Toolkit, just showing you around it and talking through how you can join and how you can put a team together if that's not something you've already done. So, Greener Practice Leeds, we should probably name ourselves Greener Practice West Yorkshire, really, because that is the territory that we cover. And we're a local branch of Greener Practice, which is the UK's primary care sustainability network. So Mike, who's just been speaking, he's one of the directors. And we started in December 2021. We actually started on an evening very much like this. It was an LMC meeting, and Honey Smith, one of the other directors of Greener Practice, was talking to us, and it inspired Tash and myself to start the local group. We've now got 47 members and counting, and we are comprised of GPs, pharmacists, practice managers, nurses and ICB members. So this is our mission statement, which you can find on the Greener Practice website under local branches. I'm not going to read it all, I'll let you have a read of it, but the key thing really is the word network. So we are part of a network, and the point of that is to tap into what's going on across the country so that we can all learn from each other's initiatives and projects and try and prevent the need to reinvent the wheel. We're also a very inclusive organisation, so anybody can join. You don't have to have any prior knowledge or experience. Non-clinical and clinical backgrounds equally welcome. And if you are interested in joining, you can see Tasha's email at the bottom there. If you just drop her an email, she'll add you to the group. So what do we actually do? Well, we meet roughly every 2 months, usually with a keynote speaker, focusing on a topic that's relevant to sustainable healthcare, and then we have a debate about it. So this is what we've been doing over the past 2 years. So our first meeting, we were focusing on key areas that we needed or wanted to address and how we might do that, what we might need, what the barriers might be. We then had a session on the Green Impact for Health Toolkit and had some students from the university join us for that. We then had 2 brilliant sessions on low carbon, high quality asthma care, led by Dr. Catherine Hickman, who's the ICB respiratory lead. And you'll know from Mike's topic presentation that that's been a massive focus of Greener Practice since the beginning. If you look at the Greener Practice website, there's a whole asthma toolkit on there, and that was a real labour of love by Dr. Arti Bansal. She worked very closely with Asthma UK to develop that. And if you have a look, there's a wealth of quality improvement projects all put together on a step-by-step basis that anyone can take into their practices, particularly if you're a training practice, they'd be great for trainees. It's a really, really good resource. So then after that, we had a joint meeting with the South Yorkshire group with Dr. Sally Fowler-Davis, and that was around prescribing and deprescribing, waste management impact on carbon reduction and population wellbeing. Then we had a bit of a social get-together at Lilac Co-Housing Project, which is where Tash lives. And then we had Dr. Gwyn Elias come and talk to us about green social prescribing and personalised care. So that was really focusing on how you can help people who are living with health challenges, long-term conditions, to be connected into their community, be as independent as they possibly can, and be as well as they can. Following that, we had the chair of the York Greener Practice Group, Dr. Ramina Onyak, come and talk to us about what she's been doing, and she has a website called The Greening of Life, which she's a bit of a genius with visual things. So if you're looking for posters for campaigns, or stickers or visual aids, there's a lot on there. And then finally in June we had Mike come to talk to us, running through very similar material that he's just presented here tonight, and then that was really the inspiration for putting this meeting together. I'm very grateful to the LMC for doing that, thank you. So what else do we do? So we've had some collaborations. We contributed to the West Yorkshire Primary Care Sustainability Network to produce the Primary Care Climate Change Toolkit. One of our members, Kate Edwards, who was due to be here tonight, but unfortunately she's not well. She's been working very closely with a pharmacy colleague, Costas Vassiliou, and they've produced a medicines waste toolkit, which I think Kirsty's going to say a little bit more about in her talk. We've also tried to work with some secondary care colleagues, so most recently we've been in touch with a nephrologist who chairs the Sustainable Kidney Council, or something along those lines. And he is very keen to raise awareness in primary care of how to intervene early in chronic kidney disease to prevent patients going on to develop end-stage renal failure and requiring hemodialysis. We also try and promote as much as we can what might be going on locally or around the country. So some examples of that would be the West Yorkshire Travel Plan Network. Any information we get about grants coming through, for example, about solar panels or boiler upgrades, tree planting initiatives. So at this time of year, the NHS Forest give away hundreds of trees. and we've been promoting park run and park walk both for staff and patients. Tash and I are both trainers, so on the education side, this year, I think it's only in a couple of weeks' time, there is the second BTS Planetary Health Day, and Tash is going to be running one of the workshops along with Mike. And Tash and I also ran a session at the Trainers Away Day just a couple of weeks ago around teaching the RCGP Planetary and Population Health curriculum. So at this point I'm going to hand over to Rosie, who's going to tell you a little bit more about herself and then give a sort of non-clinical perspective, and as part of that we'll be looking at the toolkit.
So I'm Rosie and I've recently joined Shaftesbury Medical Centre in the IT team this summer. I've got a background in sustainability, so after I graduated studying geography, which involves quite a lot of sustainability, I was quite keen to get involved in some greener practice initiatives, so Sally was happy to have me on board. So what excites me most is integrating some more sustainability practices at Shaftesbury Medical Centre and Churchview. I don't have much knowledge about the clinical side of things, but energy is quite a keen interest in mine, air pollution. Some of the non-clinical initiatives we're hoping to implement. So when I was at university, one of the projects we did with the energy management team to reduce energy demand was a traffic light system on plugs. So this could involve using stickers and a traffic light system, red, amber, green. Red stickers you can put on plugs which you shouldn't turn off, for example, gateway computers. Amber stickers you could put on plugs for printers, and green would be on fans. And that would encourage members of staff when they walk past green plugs to turn them on, turn them off even, and it would involve everyone being able to identify where they can save energy. Something else that we wanted to improve around the practice was creating more of an open carbon dialogue. A lot of colleagues and staff members might not have any carbon awareness, so being able to integrate this into office small talk, and say a weekly bulletin, notifications, opening this up around things of special interest. So you might notice people are talking a lot about carbon monoxide one week. How can you link that to sustainability? I say that as that's been a topic of interest this week, and we've been able to open a dialogue around that. Another change that we'd like to see is commuting practices, which has already been mentioned a little today. A lot of the admin staff particularly live close to the surgery, and would easily be able to participate in initiatives like walking or cycling to work. So having incentives to make this more enticing, you could create a reward scheme around this. Again, that encourages sustainability in office small talk as well.
Sally, you in the I think.
But on top of these things, as much as it is great to implement new things, we do recognise there are barriers as well. A lot of people time management is a big issue. People are busy, they have lots of tasks to do. So trying to fit that around our busy schedules, particularly when sustainability is voluntary at the moment. There's not generally a dedicated paid member of staff to do these things. It can be quite difficult to slot that into your schedule. Engaging colleagues and trying to find the right way to approach members of staff without lecturing, and slipping this into regular conversation is really important. And then when you get everyone on board, it's easier to work towards a goal. And then, overcoming resistance to change as well, that's another barrier. People meet ideas with raised eyebrows, so it's important to be able to clearly explain and engage with people to show why the change is important. So, we got the talking.
Perfect timing.
Lovely.
You filled the time beautifully.
Oh,
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. And thank you for being patient with us. Tech always has a way of letting you down. So I don't know if any other practices here are already on the toolkit. If you want to get up and running, all you need to register, you just anyone with an NHS email, you can log on with a password or then the team owner. So you then put in the name of the practice. And then anyone else in your practice can join by using their NHS email and password, and they can look for the name of your practice and join your team. So you can see that in our team, we've got our practice manager, we've got myself, we've got Dr. Victor Nicholas, who's our prescribing lead, Dr. Sharon Lewis, who's our palliative care lead, Jenna Andrews is our deputy practice manager, Jane Carlisle is our head of IT, Amy Simmons is our nursing manager, and Rosie is our superhero. And you can filter it basically by different domains. So I won't read them all out, but if I just scroll down slowly, you can see the different areas. So each of the criteria, which we'll show you a couple of, relate to these areas. And they're all very relevant. So you can see it's bigger than just carbon. The other way you can filter it is through the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's really been developed very broadly with sustainability, planetary health and population health in mind. So those are all the different domains. You can also filter it depending on level of award, whether it's a clinical or a governance area, and whether it's been achieved or not achieved. So we're just quickly going to show you an example. So under learning.
So this example, this is about educating staff members on sustainability and keeping them up to date with this. We'll go through the different tabs to show how we've done this. So the first one is the criteria. This simply just sums up what the objective is. Then we've got the further information tab, which supports people like yourselves if you want to use this sort of toolkit into how you can integrate this into your practice, and then how you will be audited. That just basically is something simple sentence to say how you'll be audited. And then comments and evidence. This is where you can upload PowerPoints, for example, that you've used to educate staff. We've got one of those here. We've got a description of when we've used this presentation and who we've presented it to. This can also be updated as you go along if you decide to implement more things into practice.
Yeah, and it's probably just worth mentioning as well. So I think you can probably use this in one of two ways. Obviously, the people that put it together have invested a lot of time and effort into it, and they're keen to gather the evidence for what we're doing. So if you want to submit all your evidence and receive your certificate for the level that you've achieved, that's great. But some practices, you know, you might not feel that that's where you can invest all your time demonstrating what you're doing. So you can just use it as a framework to give you inspiration, ideas or guidance for areas that you want to look at. And I think that's about all we had to say, wasn't it? So we're very willing to take any questions. I'm aware we've probably gone over our time a little bit.
We might do some questions after Kirsty's bit, if that's okay.
That's great.
Thank you both very much. And next, handing on to Kirsty Turner, who is a member of ICB staff and works at the CCGs in their various iterations over quite a few years, and is a great advocate for general practice within the ICB. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you. Yeah, I know Mike's gone, I never told, but I did feel like I was a big bad wolf when he kept talking about the bad ICB person, but I think he comes with the territory. But yeah, hopefully people do know that I am a real advocate for general practice. I'm a real advocate for greener practice as well. So kind of what I wanted to get come across today was more about what more can we do. So I'll gallop through because I'm conscious that everybody's probably had a long day, you know, home times looming, things like that, so I'll try and get through. The other thing I just want to mention, and as Sally's just mentioned, apologies for those people if you were here to see Kate, because unfortunately she is poorly. So I'm going to try and do a bit of her bit, but again, Kate's a real advocate within the ICB in terms of greener practice from the pharmacy team. So I suppose one of the things I wanted to really strike home a little bit was how we're not incentivised in any way to do anything about this agenda. So I looked through the 23-24 operational planning guidance, and there is no mention whatsoever in terms of sustainability, climate, environment, any of those words that you might try and kind of consider that are about planetary health or around greener practice. They're just not there. I think there's in the NHS standard contract clauses, so again not the GP contract, but certainly those contracts with the bigger providers or even the smaller providers that we might have. There are clauses around having a greener plan, minimise impacts on environment, think about reducing single plastic. But actually within what we do, apart from what we might talk about around medicines, utilisation, waste, some of the prevention agenda, there's not a real focus on kind of how are we supporting greener practice or the greener agenda within kind of our contractual mechanism. And I think that's really apparent when we walk through that it's not embedded, it's not mainstream. So it's kind of how do we try and do that? I think that's the beauty of Mike's presentation, because to me it goes back into what you all do day in, day out in terms of bringing it back into clinical practice. But I think what we need to do is do more of the things to make sure we're doing more. So within West Yorkshire as an ICB, certainly last year I think it was, there was the All Hands In campaign, and there were lots of pledges being made and a bit of an awareness, but there's a primary care toolkit and a primary care green plan. So within that toolkit there are specific things and it definitely signposts to the things that Sally and Rosie have just been talking through in terms of the Green Impact for Health toolkit. But the West Yorkshire toolkits, too many toolkits, kind of signpost to lots of other information sources, etc. Good practice. It also signposts to the fantastic work that Sally and Natasha do in terms of that greener practice Leeds and how actually for West Yorkshire it's signposted to that group. So I think real credit to Natasha and Lucy, Natasha and Sally for what they're doing, because it's kind of really driving some change within West Yorkshire. So the toolkit talks about 5 simple things that we can do to start to make a difference. So it talks about just using the GP carbon calculator to calculate what carbon use you've got within your practice. It talks about the Green Impact for Health Toolkit, which obviously Sally and Rosa just talked through. Talks about how can we get hold of the trees through the NHS Forest, again, that Sally just mentioned. Sign up to the Travel Plan Network, again, through that network you often get little bits of grants that are available around cycles or electric bikes and things like that. So again, worth considering signing up to those things just to see what opportunities there might be, and then kind of making that pledge around what difference will you make, be it a very small difference, or in your personal life, or obviously something as a practice as well, and those pledges are still aligned. So within Leeds, you know, again, we've talked about it, you know, Sally and Natasha doing great stuff, and the LMC hosting the event that, again, Sally's already mentioned. It really started to, I think, bring a group of interested individuals together, and obviously the Green Practice Leeds group formed from there. On the back of that, and the mechanism and the momentum being driven, we did develop a greener practice scheme that was just really about trying to engage with practices a bit more on the agenda, try and test who is interested, what are the things that are already going that are going on. I suppose when we think back to May 22, and I know we've talked a bit about COVID and the various highs and lows and the roller coaster that I think we've been on over the last 3 years. It was probably not the greatest time, so it probably went out there and it got lost in a sea of emails and everything else. So disappointingly, probably, well, a third of practices signed up to the scheme. There wasn't anything onerous, so for one, I don't think the ICB had put a whole load of metrics and measures and tried to jump through loads of hoops to get a tiny bit of money. But it was almost a kind of sign up and tell us what you're doing. It was only a small amount of money, so we haven't, again, tried to evaluate this massively, because I think there's something around that cost value. But these are the types of things that people were already doing. And I've got a feeling some people have probably completed this and gave some of the examples and sat around this table now. So there were some you know, good things. We've got practices who have invested in solar panels. We've got practices that have bought kind of reusable bottles and things for their staff members. You know, the simple things, encouraging everyone to switch lights off. Obviously, lots of people talked about the IIF indicator that was in place at that time that again supported that inhaler technique and the asthma toolkit, etc. And you know, it's lots of little things being done to try and make that bigger difference. So kind of that's where we're at, and there's probably more that is going on. So very quickly, Kate, who unfortunately can't be here, is one of our pharmacy technicians, and she's part of an active pharmacy network, and again, a real advocate for greener practice. I think Kate and Costas, as Sally's already mentioned, have been working on a West Yorkshire toolkit for reducing medicines waste, which is on the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership website, and would encourage people to have a look. What that tries to do, again, is bring together the climate carbon kind of impact with the work around medicines waste anyway. And I'm really conscious about saying this, and I can see Ben there, and Ben would be much better talking through this than I would be necessarily. So please chip in there. But the kind of we know about waste in terms of cost of the system, waste in terms of that, you know, the ending up in landfill. So that's very much how we normalise some of that and come at it from a different angle as well. But obviously there is significant waste from a finance point of view, which I have to say, given Mike's kind of led me down that path in some ways. But also talks about how do we deal with that and look at some of the systems and processes within practice. So how do we use ERD, so electronic repeat dispensing and those kind of mechanisms also to reduce that carbon footprint in kind of supporting medication prescriptions, etc. So just small changes that could make a big difference. So where I wanted to go with this conversation and reflecting how I started, we don't, as an ICB, it's not part of the kind of operating model, for want of a better word. There's some, corporate responsibility about climate change, but in terms of how we embed that in general practice, there isn't an NHS England framework that we have to follow. It's very much around how can we support this in practice and how do we embed it. I'll use an example. We know, and I know again many of you around these tables will be aware of this. We've got limited capital or resource available, but even the capital resource we have to support things like premises improvements we're working within guidelines from at least 15 years ago now, and the world's moved on. So I just wanted to highlight an example. So the premises cost directions, which you have to follow for any kind of premises improvements, we can support improvements in light and ventilation and heating, but then there's a specific clause that says we can't do that if it's specifically about reducing the environmental impact of premises, which just seems utterly ridiculous now. So I think that for me is the kind of really identifies the kind of problem we've got, that we're still working within legislation that just hasn't been updated, and I've just realised this is being recorded, so don't quote on that. But that is the reality of the challenge. If we're really trying to make a difference, then that's some of the challenge. So I just wanted to finish and kind of, I suppose, leading into that question is, what is the most important thing? What can we be doing as an ICB to support you? I sat here reflecting, and there is the primary care green plan that's on the West Yorkshire that needs updating, and I don't think there's the leadership to drive that through, and I think there's more I need to be doing as kind of an ICB to kind of promote that within the organisation. But yeah, what kind of improvements would you like to see? What more can we do as an ICB to support you as well? And I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Kirsty. So it's going to be a bit of an open house now. Kirsty's got some questions we might want to respond to. There might be questions for Sally and Rosie. There might be questions for Kirsty. There might be things that you've tried in your practice that we'd love you to share. How did it go? Was it great? Was it terrible? So sort of put a hand up and I'll pass you the mic.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because I've not really...
Pop it closer to your mouth.
I wanted to ask, because I've not really had a chance to ask this. Has it made a difference in our practice since we've introduced it?
Put me on the spot in front of everybody. There's two things. In terms of the toolkit, yeah, we've made really good progress. So I didn't show actually our sort of front page, but we've got our bronze, we're halfway through our silver, we're working towards our gold. But also we've been doing a lot of carbon footprinting work, and we're at the stage where we know where we are, but we're not at the stage where we're able to evaluate the impact of the changes that we've made. So what we're hoping to do is look at that on an annual basis.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Sorry, this is for Kirsty. Practices really do want to be more environmentally friendly, but the cost to do these things, we just don't have the money. So, for example, we wanted to change all our lights into kind of motion sensor lights, but there's no grants that I'm aware of. There might be that. I might need to look into further, but how do practices kind of get some resources to be able to do this? Big question, what we don't do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all we can do, and we've had a challenge, haven't we, for those people that certain practice managers will be aware. The LMC of raises, we had the primary care bulletin, the team, and so we've tried to restart something. And what I would like to do is make sure that we've got that ability to have a green slot. I don't know what the title of that would be, that to make sure we can feed in where there's grants and things like that. So certainly until those premises cost directions are updated, it's going to be a real challenge to get. It's going to be a challenge to get NHS capital unless there's a big investment in primary care capital. But I think what we need to be doing is promoting those kind of green grants that do come in periodically, so that practices can try and make those choices.
Yeah, I mean, we have changed a lot of things recently. One being, I removed all the printers out of the doctor's rooms and we just have 2 central printers which went down like a lead balloon. But we have done some things, but we do want to be more environmental friendly. It is money, isn't it?
I suppose listening to what you were saying about where there might be money available, could it be about better lighting? It's a few years now since we had a big refurb, and one of the things was lighting that goes off. If you sit still typing on your computer for long enough, it goes off and you have to wave your arms. But it's actually much better lighting for examining patients. So whether there's ways around it that it's not for environmental reasons, it's to improve patient care. They've just snuck out, but Claire, our practice manager, robin.lane at nhs.net, if you want to find out how they got refurb. I can't quite remember when it was, it might have well be before she was with us. That was just a thought. More questions, comments, things you've tried, things that didn't work, things that worked well.
Hi, I've got a couple of things. So when we had the green practice screen from the ICB last year, we signed up to it, and one of the things we did was go onto the toolkit. I'm finding it very difficult to achieve the awards because some of the things we just can't do in practice. A lot of it's to do with extra credential control, so how have you got around that to get some awards? Because there's lots of things on there that we just can't do because of primary care.
I think we started off with the low-hanging fruit, so there is some stuff on there around sort of waste management, lots of the things.
Yeah, we've completed a lot of that, but to get an award, you've got to get so many in each module, haven't you? And I'm not saying you need to get these awards. It's just a lot of stuff. It's there, and it's like it's primary care. We can't do it.
I think they might when it was. Have you been doing that this year? I think
I've been on it for about 6 months or so.
So I think part of the relaunch was that most things are supposed to count in whatever level they're at. So it's actually not difficult to achieve the bronze. I think where we probably have an advantage was in the carbon footprinting work that we did. So there is have you tried the free carbon calculator?
Like I said, I haven't been on it for a few months, and probably doing it to go back onto it.
So there's a company called SE Sustainability that has a free non-clinical carbon calculator for use in primary care. And a lot of the targets on there are around have you looked at your carbon footprint, even just establishing what it is before you try and make inroads into it. But you're right, it's a spread. Some things are easily achievable, some things I look at and I think we will never be able to achieve that. And some things are within our control and some things are very much outside. We rent our building, we share it with another practice, we share it with Leeds Community Health.
The other sounds also tonight, so it's exactly.
So when we're talking about premises changes, it's really difficult. And actually one of the things I was going to say to Kirsty, so lots of us have the same landlords, CHP, who's a sister company of NHS Properties, and they have their own green plan, and they have a sustainability lead for Yorkshire. So it's in their interest to be doing things, and it would be really helpful to know how ICB, the landlord's green plans, and then us sort of coming bottom up could meet somewhere to ideologically to get these changes happening.
It's a good idea. Right, and the other thing is, Kirsty, for medicine waste, we did used to have the medicine management scheme that I think went about 2 or 3 years ago. Is there any way that could be brought back in? I'm sure that some practices will carry on doing things like we do, but a lot of practices just won't bother now because the incentive isn't there. We used to pay a member of staff so many hours a week to look at this, and that could definitely reduce drug budgets and reduce medicines wide, so put that back in the quiz or something.
Which brings me on to, so one of the things that we are now looking at is the future of the quiz. Now, as you can imagine, you talk to any clinical leader who's got an interest in asthma or diabetes, like, well, we need this in, we need that in. But actually, it'd be really great, or one of the solutions would be about how do we align something like quiz to some of this agenda. So again, any feedback that people have got about that, but yeah, medicines waste is a good example.
And I can't help thinking, you know, the figures that Mike was showing about prescribing and waste, and you know the differences we can make clinically to our patients, but also saving money for the NHS. You know, whether that could be something that would be doable, and you know, lots of good reasons that it can be included.
And I think sometimes it's about the alignment or how you describe the alignment. So obviously one of the first people who are at GP Assembly is the alignment to the Health and Leeds Plan that's got two goals. One's about reducing unplanned activity and one's about prevention, and this to me really aligns. Some of this is very much aligned to the prevention. You know, the things about exercise and things like that is yeah.
Any more questions, comments, thoughts?
I think I can probably manage. It's not a big room.
It helps with the covering.
Okay, so yeah, on medicines management and on sort of win-wins as well, and things that you can just do yourself as an individual clinician. I changed all the Ventolin to Salamol, and I changed all the durations to 123 days, and I changed all the inhalers to one inhaler, so that it would flag up people who were ordering too many Ventolin inhalers. I had one complaint from, well, I've had a few. If people demanded to go back to Ventolin, I just put them back because I didn't really see that as a useful use of my time. It was only 2 or 3 people. One woman put in a complaint because she didn't have her Ventolin over the weekend, but she hadn't asked for it on Friday. So, you know, we'd have given it her, we'd have just asked her to come and see the asthma nurse, but we did get a complaint there. But didn't take me very long, and it's gone fine. I just sent everybody a text message to say what I was doing, and if anyone asks can I have my 3 inhalers, I say, well, if it's not lasting you 4 months, we want to know, and we frame it more in terms of we're looking after your health rather than putting the environment in a text message, though I do mention it if people are face to face, but yeah.
Thank you, that's really useful.
And just to say, so that sort of blanket switch, that one makes sense. It's not really changing anything tangible. It's, as you say, it's straightforward to do, and that's great. If you're looking at changing device, then that needs to be done in conjunction with the patient, so they're on board and they know what's going on and they know how to use their new inhaler.
I mean, if you put salbutamol, the pharmacy could issue Salamol anyway, so it's only like generic prescribing.
Yeah, just on the inhalers, on the inhalers, there's other quick wins. Prescribing by brand, we've had 2 patients this week where it was tried to prescribe budesonide easy inhaler prescribed generically, and it went as a type of MDI novelizer, which some of the pharmacies can't even get. But for 3 years, one patient's been prescribing and getting these little canisters without the actual device itself. So yeah, prescribing by brand is a big one, because then the pharmacy knows, like the Ventolin Salamol thing, pharmacy knows what to give exactly. And there is a bit of playing the metrics a little bit, so if you prescribe salbutamol generically at the moment, but the pharmacies give Salamol anyway, because that's what they're getting cheapest through the wholesalers. We checked with our local pharmacies which ones are giving Salamol anyway, and just change them to Salamol, because then no patients complain, no patients see a difference, yet your little chart on NHS BSA dashboard goes right down. It's amazing. But no one's got anything different, so we played the system there a little bit. Just with my ex-council hat on as well, I think there's a bit on partnership work in the NHS forest stuff. We've spoken to our local councillors, because we're, like yourselves and Jill, we're where it's NHS property services land, but we do have a nice green space behind, that's council green space, so it's using those connections, and the council parks people are very good at knowing what trees to plant and where we thought we could get some trees planted, we can't because there's all sorts of services underneath, but they have suggested another patch of land and they're willing to plant them as long as we water them. So it's
Great stuff. Any last thoughts or comments?
Can I just say, if there's anyone here who isn't part of our Green Practice group but wants to be, you can give me your email before you leave us.
And if you want to link up later, just mail the LMC and we'll pass it on. So thank you all. As Mike said, this is a hopeful meeting. We're talking about difficult subjects, but it's actually about what we can do individually at practice level, at system level. So yeah, let's go away with a lot of hope. Thank you all.